When you first start anything new, you're really bad at it, aren't you? You make a bunch of mistakes, you do a bunch of things wrong, and it's a whole learning process. Well, today, I want to share with you 5 mistakes that I made as a young English teacher. And you tell me if you've done these same things or if you're doing these same things. Let's go. Hey there, English teachers. Jesse here from Sweed Academy, and I want to help you in the classroom. And, you know, after 13 years, by now at this point, it's been about 13 years of teaching English. And along the way, you make many mistakes, many errors, do things wrong. You think you're doing them right, and it turns out that they're wrong, or they're just not the best way. It's a learning process, isn't it? It's a whole learning process. This whole thing we call life is a learning process, and teaching English or teaching anything is really no different, right? I remember my second year teaching, I taught some of the same material as the first year, right? The same book, same course book sometimes, and because I was in the same school. And I thought back, from the second year, I thought back to the first year, and I thought, oh, those poor kids. How did they learn anything? But then the third year, I thought the same thing about the previous year. I think that's the way it's supposed to work, isn't it? Like, that's called improvement and progress, I think. And, I guess it would be bad if we'd think back and say, boy, I wish I taught the way I did back 5 years ago, right? Then you're probably doing something wrong. But today, I want to share with you 5 mistakes that I made early on in my career and even midway in my career, things that I've learned over time. And I'd like you to tell me if you've done these same kinds of mistakes, or if you're doing these same things, or if you don't think they're mistakes at all. Let me know, and let's start a discussion down below. But let's start at number 5. And number 5 is I took myself too seriously. And, whenever we're starting something new, we don't want to show that we don't know what we're doing, right? It's kind of like that pride thing. I had a lot of pride, especially back early in my career. I had a lot of pride. And this will go with another number later on in the video. But for this, I took myself too seriously, right? And I mean, like, being too strict in the classroom. Yes, you should be strict. And you always hear at conferences, well, you have to start out the year strict because you can always lighten up. And yes, there is some truth to that. There is truth to that. But also at the same time, don't take yourself too seriously and take the fun out of it for you. Because if you take the fun out of it for yourself, then your students aren't going to have any fun in there either. And if they're not having fun, they're probably not learning that much, right? So try not to take yourself too seriously. Some areas, like I said, being too strict about coming on time, about speaking their native language in the classroom. I was very strict on that, and not strict in a good way. Over time, I've kind of lightened up, and now I'm definitely not an English only in the classroom kind of teacher. It kind of varies from class to class, but especially lower level classes, or to explain certain ideas, or to let the students to check if they understand a concept, there's room for their native language. I don't think that the English only immersion idea is the best idea necessarily. And I remember I took that as a hard, fast rule, that English only in the classroom and minus points if you speak your own language and this and that. Well, let's have some flexibility here, right? And let's keep in mind that we are teaching a second language, right? And yes, there is a place that I do have English only rules. There are certain classes that I do, but those are classes or conversations that handle it, and they do it on their own. Right? But for classes, sometimes that can be an uphill battle that is just a lose-lose for everyone if you're too strict in a bad way. And then it goes back to what I said. Then you're taking the fun out of it for them. You're just being Mr., English Nazi and Mr. English Police or Miss English, Madam English Police. And that's just not fun for anyone. There's like a power struggle sometimes. And that might be some of where this comes from, but a power struggle of, I need to usurp my authority. There's kind of that sometimes, and it can come across in a negative way. So if you are an English only teacher, that's great if it works out for you. I know in some schools in Korea, it worked out for me, and some classes it worked out. Other classes, it didn't work out. And I think the biggest thing to take away from this is to allow yourself to be flexible and have fun in there. Have fun in the classroom. Have fun with the students, and they'll drive you crazy. Don't get me wrong. It's not all fun and games, but there is more room for more fun and games, I think. So that's number 5. Number 4 is too much listen and repeat. Too much listen and repeat. And this also happened early on in my career, like the first several years, the first couple years, first few years. And too much listen and repeat without knowing why. And I think that's the key. That's the biggest importance in this tip. So we don't need to read a storybook and every sentence or two have them repeat. So we're both kind of like you and your kids are both telling the storybook, right? That's what I mean, too much. Or all of the exercises. If they do 10 exercises, fill in the blank, have them all listen and repeat. That's a little too much, I'd say, right? Now, the Jesse in 2019 says that. So too much listen and repeat. Where can we use listen and repeat? Where does it benefit? Well, I'd say listen and repeat benefits mostly in pronunciation. If you want to have pronunciation practice, rhythm practice, English intonation practice, have the students listen and repeat to certain words, certain expressions, and how we say them naturally. I think that's the place for listen and repeat, not necessarily to review all of the exercises to get them to practice. I think there are better ways to get them to practice, to use real language with each other, and we'll go over that a little later in the video. I've shared in another video, which I'll put that up here, to have the students follow the intonation with their fingers. So if they have to stress a certain word, right? So for example, what about you? What about you? I think this. What about you? Sometimes I don't know why, but they have trouble putting the right emphasis on the right syllable. But have them, what about you? What about you? And then, I think this. What do you think? What do you think? Have them move their body, their hands, or their head, whatever you want them to move. But have them move their body with their voice, and it will help a lot. That's a place that listen and repeat is good for, right? And things like two words that are spelled the same but sound differently depending on the kind of word, like record, 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 record. One is a verb, the other is a noun, right? So listen and repeat, perfect for that. Phrasal verbs, blending sounds together, take out, pick up, drop off, things like that. Have them blend those sounds together. Listen and repeat is perfect for that. And I usually have my students repeat 3 times just to get the repetition and practice, always reminding them that our mouth is a muscle and we're training our muscles. So that's number 4 mistake. Too much listen and repeat without knowing why. Number 3 was when I was using PowerPoints, right? I still do use PowerPoints, but not as much as I was. But the thing when you use PowerPoints, don't put too much information on one slide. That was a grave error. That's like a PowerPoint sin, by the way. A PowerPoint sin is putting too much text on one slide. So keep it simple, maybe 1, 2 lines. Think if you're watching a presentation, or if you've ever seen a presentation, what do their PowerPoints look like on TED videos, for example, or on any other sort of tutorial videos, right? The ones that keep your attention. Less is more. I always say this to my students and to you, less is more. 1 line, maybe 2 lines, because you don't want them to get distracted in trying to read everything and copy everything. That's what I had them do, copy everything, thinking that's practicing writing, but it's really not. It's just mindless dribble, right? But in written form. So too much information on a PowerPoint slide, too much information on a slide, or too much information in front of them. That doesn't serve anybody anything. Number 2 is too much teacher talking time. Too much teacher talking time. This is one that I think gets everybody when they first start, right? You want to do a good job. You're starting a job. You want to do a good job. You want to be busy and active the whole time. You want to act like, or you want to feel like you're doing a good job. And normally in most lines of work, if you're doing a good job, you're doing more things, right? Like if you're building a house, right? You're laying roof, you're putting on roofs. I used to be a roofer, right? You're laying roofs and installing roofs. Well, the more you do, the better, right? The more you put on, the better. And if you're an accountant, the more tax returns you get done, probably the better. In sales, the more you sell, the better. But in the classroom, the more you talk, the worse, right? Let your exercises breathe, for one. Create more exercises. I give you exercises and activities on this page to do. Find them here, find them on the internet, create them from a coworker somewhere, but find more activities for the students to engage in real conversation and with each other, right? A good tip in my CELTA course, when I took my CELTA certification, some good advice that they gave was prepare your class as if you could give it if you lost your voice. If I lost my voice and I had to give this lesson, could I give it? If your whole lesson is based on you citing grammar rules from the book, or you demonstrating a conversation, or doing a listen and repeat, like, could you do that if you didn't have a voice? And I'm not saying you should never talk, obviously, but what I try to do in my classes is give some instruction, do an example of what I want them to do, and then have them do it. We'll answer any questions, and then have them do the activity, whether it's a speaking activity, a writing activity, a listening activity, whatever. So I try to just stick with instructions, basic example and demonstration, and then let them go. And then maybe field questions or correct some of their errors after their activity, and then move on to the next activity. That's kind of how I like to structure my lessons, and that works well for me. So you figure out your pattern of what you want to work for you. But the too much teacher talking time, you're probably doing it. I can almost guarantee, especially if you're a young teacher, you're probably talking too much in the classroom. And my number 1 error as a young teacher, and even as a mid-experienced teacher, and sometimes probably even now, is I thought I was better than I was, right? You think you're better than you are. And that goes back to something I've mentioned in a podcast, is the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect basically says the more of a beginner you are at something, or the less you know about something, the better you think you are. And think back, whenever you're new at something, right? you think you're great at it. But the more you learn about it, the more you realize you don't know, right? And that's with anything, right? The more you learn about something, the more you realize you don't know, the deeper you see the hole goes. And teaching is no different. In the beginning, I thought I was better than I was. I thought I was amazing, which I've said before, when I did have bad lessons and I was aware of it, it's like, I'm a good teacher. I know I'm a good teacher because I care. I care to improve. I know now that I have bad lessons, but I'm a good teacher. And that's something you have to keep in mind. If you're a good teacher, you will want to improve. And you'll want to learn from other teachers, from students, from anybody. And that's whether you have good lessons or not, because you're going to improve if you want to improve. If you're not a good teacher, but you think that you are, and you don't want to improve, and you don't have good lessons, then that means you're not a good teacher, really, probably. And you need to humble yourself a little bit and learn from other teachers, because there are so many teachers. I'm in a team where we're always sharing ideas with each other, and it's great because other teachers are a great resource. Even if you have more experience than them, they have fresh eyes on this, or they have a different perspective. They come from a different background. We're all in this together. We're all learning from each other. And that's the point. Whether your teacher, your co-teacher is in the classroom or not, whether you have a co-teacher that's a native English speaker or not, whether they have less experience or more experience, we all have something to learn from other teachers. And that's, I think, something that when you're young and you're new and you're inexperienced and you're insecure like I was, then you it goes back to what I said in the first, and tip number 5 is like, you want to portray that you know more than you do. You want to portray that you're confident, and you don't want to ask for help. But really confident people do ask for help. And that's what makes them confident, because they're not afraid to ask for help. They know where they are. And that's what confidence is. They know where they are, and they know what they're strong in, and they know what they're weak in. And if you're a young teacher, you're going to have more weaknesses than strengths. You just are. That's the way it goes. That's what experience is for. And the thing is to put your pride aside. You see, I'm a proud person, right? I have pride. And especially when I was younger. But the thing about pride, it's one of the biggest things that will stifle learning, that will stop your learning and stop your progress. Because if you have pride, you can only see your pride. You can only see when people offend you, whether they tried or not. And you can only see other people's mistakes, and you can't see your own. And if you can't see your own weaknesses, if you can't see your own mistakes, then it's really hard to fix them, and it's really hard to strengthen them. So these are the 5 main mistakes, the 5 biggest mistakes that I thought about in my own career, when I was starting out as an English teacher, when I had a few years of experience already, but I was still making some of these mistakes. And who knows, maybe in another 5 years, I'll make a video on how the mistakes I made in these 5 years, right? Because as I said in the opening, we should always kind of be looking back in our progress and seeing how bad we were in the past compared to now. That's what progress is, isn't it? Well, I hope that this video helped you. I hope it gave you some ideas and some encouragement. Let me know below if you have made some of these similar mistakes, or if you have other mistakes. And if you disagree, if you think some of what I said is not a mistake. And we'll talk about that below, or on social media, on Twitter at Sweed Academy, Instagram, Sweed Academy, and Facebook if you're still doing that. Keep teaching and keep learning. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.